I want to start with what's been happening the last few days in South Africa. As we confront here in Europe and the UK an energy crisis, so do the people of South Africa. And we saw power cuts over the weekend. Do you expect that to continue?
Well, good morning to you, Tom, and thank you very much for having us. What we expect is that the kind of crisis that we've experienced over the last 10 days, where we've had load shedding of a significant order, will decline by this weekend. And that in terms of the plans that we have, both the immediate and medium to long term, we will recover from that. We will have load shedding for a while in South Africa, perhaps at level 2, as we call it here, as the new investments in energy, particularly renewable energy, begins to kick in. So our plan is firstly to ensure that the current electricity utility, Eskom, continues to improve its performance, and a lot of effort is going into that. And hopefully sooner rather than later, that pays dividends. The second, which has been happening for the past few years and will accelerate, which is getting private investment into generation capacity. And we have a mechanism called bid windows in South Africa, and thousands of megawatts of renewables in the form of wind and solar have been committed to already by private sector investment. So that will accelerate as we go into next year, and that will provide quite a relief in terms of available megawatts to our system. And thirdly, in the immediate instance, we are also trying to procure short-term energy, which will assist us in the current crisis.
Okay, so that's a bit of a long-term view in terms of how to rewrite the ship for the utility Eskom and get the grid back on track. You talk about load shedding, though, so presumably then we can assume from that there will be businesses and the people of South Africa should brace for more blackouts in the days and weeks ahead, potentially.
But not of the order that we've seen in the recent past. And that's what we want to mitigate as much as possible. We understand the disruptions that this causes, as you see it in Europe and elsewhere, to businesses as well. And we want to mitigate that as much as we can.
Is there a risk of the grid collapsing? How much faith do you have?
No, there's no risk whatsoever. I think we have a great set of experts operating within Eskom and managing the grid. And the load shedding is exactly in place in terms of levels 1, 2, 3, 4, and so on, in order to prevent the grid from collapsing. And it will certainly not get to that point.
A lot of this is down to failing infrastructure, essentially. What is the government's plan to address the vulnerabilities in the energy infrastructure?
Well, we've had mishaps in terms of government decisions some 15, 20 years ago, when power stations should have been built in the early 2000s, and there was a decision at the time not to do that. And when the decision was made, it was made a bit too late. As a consequence, we have the shortage of supply that we have currently. There have been previous bouts of load shedding as well. And of course, you've seen it elsewhere in the world, in California, in Texas, and in parts of Europe today as well. So in our case, the existing coal-powered fleet is oldish, so to speak. There are some newer plants. We have a very reliable nuclear plant in Coburg in the Western Cape that's undergoing some kind of refurbishment, but that'll be back on track soon. And we get hydropower from Mozambique, which is very reliable as well. So the infrastructure, particularly in terms of the transmission grid, needs to be expanded, and massive investments need to take place there in order to connect new renewable investments in other parts of the country to the main grid. So those are new investments that will occur. We've got to sustain what we have at the moment and complement what we have with the new investments.
So that's in terms of the energy mix and those additional investments that are needed, as you say, significant investments. For the time being, do you have confidence in the leadership of Eskom? And for our viewers who don't know, this is the biggest utility company, or at least provides about 95% of energy for South Africa. Do you have confidence in their management, in the CEO of that company?
Well, to date, they've done the best they can, but I think we've got to keep under constant review whether the governance and the management capability is of the order which would help us to meet the current crisis. What we are doing at the moment is trying to encourage Eskom to recruit some of the more experienced people, and they've already done so to some extent, and we'll do more of it in order to mentor the younger managers at power stations. And that'll help us to complement the skills capacity that we require within Eskom today. But we are in a challenging environment, and in a challenging environment, we've got to be agile, we've got to be watchful, and make changes if those are necessary.
And you talked about the massive investment that's needed in the energy infrastructure in South Africa. Are you seeing an appetite from the private sector to invest and to build out with you? And what more could the public sector be doing? And indeed, is there an opportunity for multilateral banks to assist in this?
Well, all of that is happening. The private sector has shown a huge appetite. The mining sector, for example, has billions of rands already in place in order to build their own capabilities as far as renewable energy is concerned. Investment from the private sector together with the financial institutions has been taking place at quite a hectic pace over the last 4 years once we opened the gates. The same is happening from the multilateral institutions in terms particularly of helping us with the just energy transition. And that would involve loan to some extent and significant amounts of grant is what we expect from the developed countries, some of which we saw committed during COP26. And we hope that as we go to COP27 in Egypt, more commitments will be made so that developing countries like South Africa and others on the African continent will have the financial resources to undertake the energy transition in view of the climate change challenges that we all face.
OK, and Minister, before we let you go, and I want to draw on your experience as Finance Minister as well over a number of years for South Africa. What are you seeing in terms of FDI? When do you expect FDI, foreign direct investment, in your country to turn around as we weigh up these headwinds, whether it's the energy crisis or pressure on the rand?
Well, I think we've had incremental investments already, and each year, apart from the COVID years, the President has convened an investment conference that has attracted by next year, almost R1 trillion in foreign investment. And more of that will happen once we have energy security on the one hand. And there's a huge amount of interest as we go through other transitions. For example, the green hydrogen project, which South Africa is well placed to capitalize on, the building of electric vehicles, and the transition that auto manufacturers, which is a big part of South Africa's manufacturing industry, is a transition that they will undertake, and their investments, together with the government assistance and hopefully foreign assistance as well, will be another area that will bring in investments. We've seen some big buyouts by Middle Eastern companies, of a logistics company, for example, in recent times as well. So the appetite for investment in South Africa, given its very modern infrastructure, is quite high. And from within the country itself, there's a huge appetite for private and public cooperation into investments in infrastructure of a very significant order as well.